There's a storm coming.
You sound like you're looking forward to it.
I'm adaptable.
Mr. Bale, I want to start at the ending, and I want to talk about your last day of shooting. And I'm curious, were you shooting as Bruce Wayne or as Batman?
No, as Batman.
Batman. Do you think that if it had been the opposite, that would have changed the dynamic of what that last day meant to you?
Yeah, of course, yeah. You know, the last scene that we shot was on top of a roof in Manhattan with the Bat and myself as Batman. And so, yeah, you know, it was very much the end of me ever donning, you know, this incredibly iconic character, you know, again. And I felt that immensely.
And one of the most important lessons that Bruce learns in Batman Begins, and obviously it comes full circle here, is why do we fall? And of course the answer being so we can learn to pick ourselves back up. Thinking about all the hardships that you faced while shooting these three movies, which fall, in any sense of the word, best taught you how to pick yourself back up?
Oh man, I find that difficult to be specific about. You know, there are so many. They're not necessarily large falls like you see in movies. You know, they can happen all the time and very slowly and gradually. But you know, I mean, I'm sure you've had many, you know, yourself, and we do that throughout all of our lives, don't we?
But mine don't look nearly as cool as yours do.
But those aren't mine. Those are the characters.
Very true, very true. Now, what I think is great about having Bane as a villain is that this is the first time that I'm watching a fight and thinking Batman could actually lose. He's being physically tested for the first time. So I was wondering, what did this movie do to test you as an actor for the first time?
Well, it was the culmination of a conversation that Chris Nolan and I first had when we first met, you know, talking about that Batman must be every bit as interesting as any of the villains, that we had felt that sometimes that had not been the case in some examples of the Batman story. And that we wanted to make sure that we didn't make what we felt was that mistake again. And you know, he comes to find that things are not quite as simple as he would have hoped, and that he has kind of lost his sense of self, you know, in the beginning of this movie, and is certainly not living a life that any of his parents, either of his parents, would commend him for, and has lost his way. And so we always wanted to maintain that playing Batman and Bruce Wayne in his many different guises, you know, should be a challenge, and that he should be a very intriguing character.
Of course, of course. There's an absolute beautiful moment in the movie where Anne Hathaway looks at you and says, "You've given them everything," and you reply back, "Not everything, not yet." What was that last final thing you felt you needed to give Batman before walking away?
I just always feel like you have to just give everything. You know, it's such a honor to get to play this character, and you know, as any actor, we're fortunate to get to work on anything, and so you have to give everything. You know, you have to put everything out there, and I've always had just an image which is of Jimi Hendrix, of just him playing guitar and the ecstasy he seemed to get through that, and a story which I've never been sure. I don't really care if it's true or not, but just of his fingers bleeding, but him just sort of ignoring that, and you know, knowing that how fortunate we are to be able to do what we do, and so you know, never complain about any of this. Or any hardships, just look at the honor of getting to play such a character.
Yes, sir. Well, it's an honor to get to sit across from you, and thank you for creating the greatest trilogy of all time. It's an absolute honor.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
What are you? I'm Gotham's reckoning.
You're so excited.
I'm geeking out about this.
You look like you just like freebase rocket fuel.
Pretty much. That's what I feel like for the last 3 hours. Jake Hamilton, Fox Houston. I was just telling I spent the weekend with my folks, and they were even telling me, like, maybe you should calm down a little bit. And I was like, this is calm. This is going to be as calm as it gets. But I just want to start by saying, obviously, this movie shows that you can have different versions of a well-known character, and they can still work. So I was wondering, what is a classic attribute about Catwoman that you were glad to have left behind, and what is something that's original to her in this movie that you're most proud of?
I was happy that I didn't have any scenes with cats,
Mm-hmm.
just because they're very difficult to work with. And I was so happy to keep her sense of humor.
Mhm.
And I mean, that's such an integral part to the character. And I was happy that Chris found a way to show that she had a sense of humor, but that she was also a very, very dark person, and that there was nothing ridiculous about her, but she was just a real soul.
Right. What I liked about the sense of humor is that it didn't take you out of the movie. It wasn't like, let's stop and tell a joke and let's get back. That was, I thought it was very fluid.
She's someone who can tell a joke on the run,
Right.
which I appreciate in a person.
I can never do that. I'm the guy that comes up with the punchline like 3 minutes later.
Isn't it so nice when you're just in the right place and it just comes out and you don't even think about it?
Exactly.
Oh,
I never have those moments.
Once a decade.
Exactly. Now, I read an interview with you recently where you said that whenever Christopher Nolan called you, there was a period of time that you thought he was calling you for Harley Quinn. So you went into the meeting thinking that he was talking to you about that. So I was wondering, you had to have gone to that meeting with already maybe a few ideas of what you would have done. If it had been Harley Quinn, like what are some of the few ideas you had already formed about the character?
I haven't thought about that in ages. I'd worked out a giggle and a skip.
Really?
Yes, which I wasn't going to show Chris. But then halfway through, we had our first sit down was about 2 hours. We had a 2-hour conversation. And after the first hour of us just talking about this and that, he said, all right, so the role. And I'm like, and I'm sitting there and I'm trying to like give him like a little sinister something, I don't even know what. And he goes, it's Catwoman. And I'm like, you can bleep it out. I was like, fudge. Okay, completely changed my tack. And I literally went from like this really like hyper intense energy to being like, and I'm going to become really laid back right now and very slinky. So, and then it took him a while to decide who he wanted to come in and screen test, and I was just waiting on pins and needles. And I found out a few days after my screen test that I got in.
I'm so glad you did.
Well, it was immediately, it was like,
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Is there any way I could hear the Harley Quinn giggle?
no.
Worth a shot, I had to ask. One of the things I think, obviously about Catwoman that everyone knows is that she's, before this movie, originally known by being played by Michelle Pfeiffer. And this movie shows that someone else can come in, take on a role that's famous, and really make it her own. 20 years down the line, if another actress wants to come in and take over one of your famous roles, which actress would you like to see take over one of your roles to kind of see what she does with it?
I never really thought about it. I mean, I'd love to see Meryl Streep play Princess Mia
That would be
in
great.
Princess Diaries if she wanted to do that. I think
And
that
she
would
could.
be. She can do anything. She just did Juliet in Romeo and Juliet in Central Park. That woman can do anything.
The guys from Magic Mike told me they want her to be in Magic Mike too. They told me that last week. So
Absolutely. I'd like to see Channing Tatum play Selena Kyle.
I would like to see that.
I'd pay to see Channing Tatum in anything.
Oh, calm down. They're giving me the rap. I
You're
love you.
jealous.
I know you.
You're
a little
so
bit.
jealous.
A little
You
bit.
don't like that I like Channing Tatum.
Not at all. Not at all. I know you have a man. You'll always be the love of my life. You know I love you.
Thanks, baby.
So good to see you.
It's nice to see you doing so well.
Did they kill him?
I'm not sure. Why didn't you just kill me? Your punishment must be more severe.
So I think in terms of your experiences to be able to evolve your character, obviously you guys had two completely different experiences. You had 3 movies to be able to do it, and you had 1 movie. If it had been opposite, if you had had 3 years to be able to learn about Blake, if you'd only had 1 year to learn about Gordon, which attributes would you have wanted to explore, and which ones would you have wanted to make sure that you got in?
Wow.
I don't know if I can answer that.
That's a good question.
Thank you. I'm trying to ask something that not everyone's asking all day.
That's rare. That's rare. What would I want to explore more? Well, I think what I loved and first connected with about the character Blake that I played is his idealism. He's an optimist, and everyone around him has sort of grown cynical and has kind of become lazy and willing to just accept the status quo. And Blake is the one who's like, wait a minute, I'm not sure if everything's right. Why don't you guys open your eyes? And that's a quality I like in any human being, rather than just going with the status quo, to sort of think for yourself. And I admire that in him. I wouldn't mind exploring that further, I suppose.
Absolutely.
Answer your question?
Well, I got a chance to explore that.
You did.
Because
That's
because they're cut. They are to some extent cut from the same cloth, and that's what Gordon. That's.
You're saying I stole your answer?
Well, no, I'm trying to, but it's like I said, it is when we first met. It's basically where you're coming into the story,
Right.
is where we sort of meet Gordon.
In the first movie.
In the first movie,
Right.
even though he's not a rookie, but it's you feel that you're fighting against the odds, and that it's a hopeless cause.
Now, I want to talk about expectations for a second, because everyone's talking about fan expectations and are they too high? Well, I was just geeking out to you about mine. But I want to talk about like an actor's expectations. When you're waiting on the script, when you've gotten word and you're kind of just waiting to find out what the story's going to be, is there ever that fear of like, maybe it's not going to be good? Like maybe my expectations are too high as an actor?
Well, I never. I mean, I thought early on when we were doing press for other things, the question that is always asked of you is, how's Batman and what's it going to be, and you were sort of sworn to secrecy and you couldn't give anything away. But I always said, look, I can't tell you anything about it, but the story's terrific. I think he's just going to deliver something special. I never worried that the script would be less than.
No, I didn't either.
Yeah, and I know that the Dark Knight is that's big shoes to fill. I mean, particularly because of Heath and that character, which is so famous. It's such a great character, the Joker, and I thought, well, he's going to have to top it. And he did, but I got the script and said, man, this is fantastic, Or what? Did you get the whole thing, or did you get the?
I went to his house and had to read the whole thing in one sitting.
To the house,
Mhm.
because he was giving the script out, obviously, with that people read the script and they didn't read the ending.
Do you think he's coming back? I don't know.
Why would you run, Bane?
You should be as afraid of him as I am.
I won't bury you. I've buried enough members of the Wayne family.
I was wondering, from the first time you heard action on Batman Begins to the last time you heard cut on The Dark Knight Rises, what was that first single moment when you realized that this wasn't just going to be a popcorn flick, wasn't going to be a superhero movie, but this was going to be the kind of movie that changed Hollywood?
But for me, when I read the script.
Yeah.
But I mean, you've got this, isn't it? It's the script.
Yeah.
Because if I'd have been given, and I'm sure it's the same with Morgan, if I'd have been given the butler and I came in and said, dinner is served, would you like some tea, and go and washed up, and I wouldn't have done the part. But what I was looking with Batman Begins was great relationships, great writing, and a need for a performance. And it's been like that in all three. So I've been very happy. And the genius of Christopher is that you don't usually get that in a blockbuster with stunts and special effects all over the place. But here you've got real people, real drama, and we're played by very good actors. We have wonderful actors in these.
Yeah, and just to add just the tiniest bit there, the fact that you've got human story behind the action is what we all actually viscerally responding to. This is somebody can be hurt.
Right. And what I love about Lucius and Alfred are that they tie Bruce to a sense of reality, and you guys really worry about him diving too deep into the role of Batman. So I was wondering, you guys have worked with so many co-stars. Has there ever been a moment where you were afraid that a co-star was diving too deep into a character?
I've seen it, but I've never experienced it. No.
Can I ask where you saw it?
On stage.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Is that ever?
Sometimes you feel like you need to take an actor and pluck him back out and say, "Hold on, you're just acting."
No, I wouldn't dare say anything.
Which makes me feel like there is a story there.
Yeah, there is a story.
No, he's
I ain't
always
telling it.
Gotcha, fair enough. Fair enough. I had to ask. It was worth asking.
Yeah, all right.
What's great about Batman is that Batman would not be Batman without Alfred, and he wouldn't be Batman without Lucius. If I were going to say that Morgan Freeman would not be Morgan Freeman without, or Michael Caine would not be Michael Caine without, who would be that name that would suit that sentence?
I'll speak for him. It would be his dad.
My dad.
Can I ask why that is?
Yeah. No, my dad he left at the beginning of the war to go to war. He was a soldier, and he came back at the end. He never came on leave for 5 years. They just kept fighting, and he came back at the end. And so he was my hero. But my mother made me what I am in one sentence. When my father went away, instead of my brother and I was 6 and my brother was 3, and we were standing there, and she said, instead of saying, oh, what am I going to do? Your dad's gone, you 2 kids. She said to both of us, 6 and 3, she said, your dad's gone, now you 2 have to look after me. And we both went, right, Mum, don't you worry, we'll look after you.
We'll do it.
And that made a man of me in one sentence when I was 6.
Unbelievable. Morgan, is there someone that, for you, that
Yeah, my mother. You know, mother's always there.
Yeah.
Same for me.
Yeah.
Same for me. Gentlemen, it's one of the single greatest honors of my life to get to sit in front of you. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you.
You don't owe these people anymore. You've given them everything.
Not everything. Not yet.
This interview is a big deal for me, so I went back and began watching all of your films over again to get ready for it. And upon watching your first film, Following, I noticed something very interesting on someone's apartment door. Would you have any idea what that thing that I would be noticing is?
I know exactly what you're noticing, which is the sticker of the bat symbol on the lead character's door.
Yes.
And I did not put it there. Barely even noticed it was there when we were filming it. It's pure coincidence.
Well, then let me ask, because then I began watching Memento. And when I was watching Memento, I noticed something very interesting.
Yes.
Can you imagine what I might have seen in Memento?
What you've seen in Memento, which no one else has ever asked me about, actually, is there are a number of comic book logos at one point in that film. Once again, pure coincidence.
And one of which is Batman, and one of which is Superman.
Batman, one of which is
enough,
Superman, yes.
Which is, do you see any sort of, even though it might not have been on purpose, do you see any sort of like poetic justice
definitely.
in that?
No, I love the idea of that kind of fatalism, that kind of, but it is, I mean, it's coincidence, but what we make of coincidence is up to us. But the thing that it also tells you is these characters are tremendous icons, have been around for a very long time, and they are everywhere. They're on T-shirts, they're on buildings, they're everywhere. And so when you approach Batman, you do it with a big sense of responsibility. You're really going to have to deliver people something.
Absolutely. Now, when The Dark Knight cut to black 4 years ago, you left many cliffhangers for audiences, one of which being you literally left the Joker just hanging there. And I thought it was respectful and appropriate that you didn't address it in this movie, because you don't want to make light of the tragedy of Heath Ledger.
It feels, with a friend, a colleague like Heath, the tragedy that happened to him, to me it would feel very reductive, very, very trivial to try and incorporate that in some way into a fictional story or account for it in some way. And so we took the decision early on to leave it to one side and be respectful of it in that way.
But I'm curious, before the tragedy, was there ever a point where you considered bringing the Joker back and continuing that story?
We were very early in our process. We were just starting our edit when Heath died, and so I take on one project at a time. I really had no sense of whether we would continue the story, whether we would carry on until after the film was finished.
Mm-hmm. Now, you have had 3 incredible themes that you've always talked about throughout the 3 films. Batman Begins was fear, The Dark Knight was chaos, and this one is pain. So I was wondering if you could kind of give me an example of each one that you felt in those movies, like an example of how you felt fear in Batman Begins, how you felt chaos in The Dark Knight, and how you felt pain in The Dark Knight Rises.
Well, I think it's a little tricky, but certainly felt a lot of fear with Batman Begins. That's easy. I mean, I'd never done a film on that scale, and taking on an icon like Batman, there was a huge responsibility. So there was tons of fear involved. As far as chaos in The Dark Knight goes, it was a very well managed production, and so it wasn't too chaotic. We had our day for the funeral scene there with hundreds of extras. I think we had about 800 people, and that at times felt a little chaotic, particularly when they're all running around. But it was nothing compared to what we get into with The Dark Knight Rises, where we had, on one day we had 11,000 people to work with and everything. So I guess that was sort of preparation for that. As far as pain goes, I didn't experience an enormous amount of pain, mercifully, making The Dark Knight Rises.
Well, give me the wrap, but I wanted to ask really quick, one of the things about the movie, there are so many rumors always spreading around whenever there's this much anticipation. And I had a few I was just going to run through, and I was curious if you would tell me if there was ever any truth to them whatsoever.
Okay.
Okay.
We'll see.
The fact that they were pushing DiCaprio to play the villain on you.
No truth.
No truth. The fact that there was a period of time where you're considering never coming back.
When I was considering, certainly that is true. It's true that until I know that I've got a story I have to tell, I'm not going to commit to something. And so it took me a while to figure out that we really did have a story to tell. A couple of months, certainly, after The Dark Knight came out. Yeah.
And last one, the fact that you verbally told all the actors the ending of the film so that you wouldn't have it written down on paper.
That is certainly true, depending on if the actors needed to read it or not. We kept the ending locked up pretty tight, and I did wind up just explaining the ending to a lot of people who worked on the film.
Absolutely. Mr. Nolan, it's a single great honor in my life. Thank you for creating the greatest trilogy in
Thank you.
history.